Welcome to an uplifting dialogue with stories about how life can be powerfully transformed with Susan Brender. This is the Susan Brender Show.
I'm Susan Brender, and this is the Susan Brender Show. Today we have a very special guest, and her name is Elisa. Elisa Cruz-Torres received her Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology from Moravian College in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and her Master of Education in Curriculum and Instruction from Florida Atlantic University. She's a board-certified behavior analyst and is also certified to teach K through 12. Elisa's experience includes working as an intensive case manager for adolescents with mental health disorders, and she does so much to help people with autism. I want to welcome to my show Elisa Cruz-Torres.
Hi, Susan. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction.
Well, I really think you deserve it because, you know, autism is a horrible disorder for some people, and I really want to know, what is autism spectrum disorder?
So autism spectrum disorder, which we often refer to as ASD, it's a neurodevelopmental disorder. And what it is, it impacts two very broad categories of development. And those two categories are social communication and restricted interests and repetitive behaviors. Now, when we're talking about, impairments in social communication, what we're talking about are several things. First, we're talking about an individual's ability to, receive information. So their receptive language may be impaired. So they may have difficulty processing information, whether it's verbally or written. You may also have impairments in expressive communication. So vocalizing, being able to communicate verbally, that might be impaired. Then you also have the social piece of this, right? So if you have vocal or verbal communication impairments or expressive language impairments, you're likely going to also have social impairments or social challenges. And when we're talking about, the spectrum, we're talking about individuals who struggle with, maintaining a back and forth conversation, reciprocity when communicating with other people, which is going to impact, their ability to establish and maintain relationships. And then the other piece, the restricted interests and the repetitive behaviors, that second category, what we find there are, the physical things that we can see, those abnormal, physical movements. So the more classic, flapping of the hands, twirling of the body, jumping up and down, those kinds of things. You also find in this category a rigidity, a fixation with a particular thing, or an interest, special interest, and an inability or a real struggle to sort of handle a change in that routine, an unexpected change, I should say. You also find sensory issues in this category. So a hypersensitivity to some of the senses. So, perhaps smells or, touch or feel. So some individuals might be, as I mentioned, hypersensitive to this. It might be, they're overstimulated easily. You also have individuals who are hyposensitive to some of these things where, they can't get enough touch, or pressure or things like that. So just like the spectrum itself, you have a variety of, challenges and impairments within these two categories of social communication and restricted interest and repetitive behaviors.
So tell me something about what can cause ASD.
So this is, this is where we're at right now. We're in April, right? This is Autism Awareness and Acceptance Month, and more people are becoming more familiar with even just the word autism. Whether they know somebody with autism or not, they've likely heard of the term, and so that is in part due to lots of research, right? Lots of research being done because I honestly, Susan, can't even answer that question because there is no cause for autism. They're doing lots of research on the brain because it is a neurodevelopmental disorder, and so they're looking at these components of the brain where communication develops, and they're studying with fMRIs and looking at these pieces in the brain as children start to develop, from infant and on. Where are these gaps? What's happening here? Additionally, they're doing lots of research on genetics. They're finding more and more clues that are leading to genetics sort of playing a role in autism being diagnosed. And they're also looking at environmental factors. And really what, more and more of the research is showing is that it's a combination of, genetic predisposition with environmental factors, and sort of, these two things combining to then, sort of set off, so to speak, this disorder. But nothing is confirmed.
I'm just interested in knowing a little bit more about genetics. You spoke about genetics being perhaps one of the causes, if you will, of this, well, I'm not going to call it horrible, I'm just going to say disease, because for some children I know that they are very high functioning, and that's another question I want to ask you. So let's start with genetics. You mentioned it. What do they do? How do they work with genetics to find out certain aspects of what would cause this problem?
I wish that I could, I'm not a neuroscientist and I'm not a geneticist, and this, just isn't my field of expertise. At our Center for Autism here at FAU, we work with individuals and families who already have children diagnosed with autism, so they have the diagnosis, and we're here to help them along their journey. And so, we have these medical scientists who are, really delving into the whole, the brain piece of it. And so I can't really speak to that because I'm just not knowledgeable so much in that. But I can say that, there are studies being done not only with children, as they develop, and they're, as I mentioned, the fMRIs, they're doing lots of studying using these magnetic images in the brains and comparing how children with autism, how their brain, pieces of the brain light up compared to a typically developing peer, and where those differences are with the, quote unquote, lighting up in the brain. But they're also looking at post-mortem brain tissues. And I'd like to direct you and your audience members to check out a really great video. You can Google it or search for it on YouTube. If you just Google UC San Diego, brain development in autism, you'll come across, or you'll have access to a really nice 2-minute video that does a really good job of just sort of breaking down the layers, the cortical layers, I believe they're calling them, or that they're named. And these are based on post-mortem tissue samples and studies that they're doing on the brain tissue of individuals with autism that have passed. And the findings are just amazing. They found that there's a part of the brain that each of these, the subjects that they studied, that there is a particular piece in the brain that did not develop fully. And so, once these scientists are able to identify the particular part of the brain, and, the development piece of it, and where the impairment is being caused, the better they're going to be able to sort of create, treatments to address that part of the brain. So because we don't have a cause right now, we don't have a cure. And so, these researchers are doing amazing things. And I encourage your listeners to just check out the research, because there's a lot of, because we don't have a cause and we don't have a cure, there's a lot of pseudoscience stuff that's out there that's available to parents who are, really desperate to help their children. And, we know that there are certain treatments and interventions that are evidence-based that are effective. But then there are some other things that, families are being exposed to that don't have any science behind it to support it. But again, families are desperate and hopeful that their children can make lots of gains. And so we just want to make sure that families are aware of what the research is that's out there. The vaccinations, the MMR vaccinations is a really big, hot, controversial topic. There's been multiple studies, debunking the theory that MMR vaccinations have caused autism. As a matter of fact, Dr. Gupta was just on CNN, I believe, yesterday, sharing his insight and doing some more research, sharing some more research findings about MMR vaccines not causing autism. And it's a good 2-minute, another good 2-minute video. If anybody wants to check that out on CNN.com, Dr. Gupta. Again, I just encourage folks to educate themselves on the research and on the interventions.
I'm interested in the fact that so many years it took us to really identify autism, because when I was young, I never heard the word autism. Mm-hmm. It's a very strange thing, isn't it, that suddenly so many people have autism. What's your explanation? Do you have any sense of why we suddenly have this huge rise in children with autism, and also adults, we're finding out, have autism as well?
And that's a great question, and that question is raised often. The prevalence rate is 1 in 68 right now, and that report was shared by the CDC last year. Their findings reported that 1 in every 68 children in the United States is diagnosed with an autism spectrum disorder, and it's even more prevalent in boys, where it's 1 in 42 for boys. And there are a variety of reasons, again, and allowing the medical field to do their thing with the research. On our side, as far as clinical professionals, what we are finding is that there's a variety, perhaps reasons for why this prevalence is occurring. One of the main contributors to this, we feel, is just public awareness. More people are becoming more aware of autism, and when you're more aware of autism and its characteristics, you then know what the signs are, right? So in the past, as you mentioned back in your day, unfortunately, knowledge about autism and the characteristics wasn't as well known. And so what we found, and what we're hearing now from the folks who were later diagnosed, is that, they were miscategorized, misdiagnosed with, some other disorder, perhaps mental retardation or something along those lines. And this was very common, actually, for individuals who couldn't communicate verbally. They was just assumed, oh, you can't speak, you must have a cognitive or intellectual disability, and received a mental retardation diagnosis, and were then subsequently locked up in a psychiatric facility. All the while, they could function, very well. They were cognitively there. They just didn't have a means for communicating. And these stories, unfortunately, are too common, especially when you speak with that particular population. So, awareness of what it is, awareness of the fact that, like I just mentioned, just because an individual can't verbally speak doesn't mean that they have an intellectual disability. We now know that that's not the case. You give them a tool to communicate with the world and access their world, you're going to hear, you're probably going to hear lots of really amazing thoughts and insights. The other thing is we have better tools, right? We have better tools for assessing and evaluating and diagnosing individuals with autism. So, I'm sorry. So I was just, that was another piece that I was going to suggest is, for your listeners, anybody that's interested in, perhaps having a child evaluated, or even an adult. There are some, you want to go to a professional who is using these valid ASD-specific tools to assess.
So can individuals with autism live happy and independent lives?
Absolutely. And that's a great question, because, some of us, in the public who maybe aren't so aware of autism, and we think more of the classic child with autism who sort of flaps and is nonverbal and, might be more severely impaired. There are tons of strategies and interventions, and more specifically evidence-based stuff that points to real significant progress. The outcomes are amazing. And I'd love to share that, some of these resources with you and your audience as well. The National Autism Center recently published their findings on evidence-based practices. So they've researched tons and tons of peer-reviewed articles. They've done all of, the academic work, filtering all of, all those studies out. And what they've derived are 11 evidence-based interventions that really work for our population. And I'd like to share a personal story here. I just finished my dissertation, and I, part of my treatment was working with the mothers of 3 teenagers, right, adolescents who are just about to, enter young adulthood and transition out into the real world. And I worked with their parents to teach that parent and coach that parent on how to deliver one of these evidence-based interventions. And they delivered these evidence-based interventions so that their child can learn a more independent living skill. So one case in point, I had a 17-year-old who had limited verbal communication. They had been trying all kinds of things over the years to try to help her learn how to tie her shoes. So for 10 years, they've been trying unsuccessfully. So this 17-year-old girl who likes to wear really cool Nikes, she doesn't want to wear the Velcro sneakers, had to rely on all of the adults in her life, her parents, the teachers, her assistant. All of these people were taking their time out to tie her shoes whenever that was needed. Well, the intervention that I used was modeling. The parent learned how to deliver these video models to the child, and she learned in 3 weeks how to tie her own shoes.
That's a miracle. That is a miracle.
It was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
It was amazing. And the mother was, can you imagine as a parent, how much pride you have in yourself knowing that you can teach this intervention that has been deemed effective, but is usually implemented by a professional. Well, parents can do it too. And parents should be doing it because parents can become the most effective therapist that their child could possibly have. And so, again, I encourage your readers to check out that National Autism Center Evidence-Based Practice Report and check out what those interventions are because, just learning how to tie her shoes has increased the independence level for this particular adolescent. And so that's evidence that, yes, individuals can lead happy, independent lives with the right support.
For those in our audience who don't know what evidence-based means, describe to them exactly what it means.
So evidence-based means that multiple studies have been done on a particular intervention. So, for example, I'll just refer back to the case I just gave you, the video modeling. This is where, an individual watches a skill being demonstrated and then they go do it so that they can practice it and learn it. And in essence, they have a perfect model showing them how it should be done. That is one of many interventions that have proven to be effective. Video modeling as an intervention has been researched and studied and published since the 60s across a variety of disabilities. And so when we're looking at evidence-based interventions for individuals with autism, you want to look at the frequency, the number of subjects, the academics who sort of synthesize the literature and research which interventions are effective, look at all of the publications and they create sort of a matrix and a criteria to meet a scientific or evidence-based. So you have to have an X number of studies published supporting positive outcomes for that particular intervention, whether it's video modeling or natural environment teaching, or there's a slew of them. Discrete trial teaching is a popular one. And so when you have enough publications supporting positive outcomes for particular interventions across group designs as well as single subject designs, meaning, there's less subjects but more intensive intervention being provided, then they meet criteria for evidence-based practices. And that's a great question because, if you're sort of not in the academic field, this might sound foreign to you, but that report that I keep referring to outlines the criteria that they set for meeting evidence-based practice.
You and I talked about a situation that I ran into, which was having a young woman take a seed and plant it in the ground and see something grow. And when we discussed this, I was very excited to tell you that there are other ways that we can create a situation that is very productive for children and adults with autism. So let me just repeat the story. There was a girl, and she was with her babysitter, if you will, because she unfortunately didn't have the skills to be able to be on her own. And when she saw a seed put in the ground, she said, on her computer, by the way, because she couldn't speak either, she said, I love this. And now there is a farm in New York State and in Long Island, and what they're doing is they're giving children with autism a chance to plant vegetables, fruits, and other things too. And what they're also doing is giving the children who are young adults, they're not really children, a place to live and a place to make money. What's your thoughts on that? Isn't it an inspiration?
Absolutely, and kudos to those folks who were innovative enough to, take that, the woman who introduced her to the seed and introduced her to the love of gardening and pulling that out of her, and then the folks who just ran with that and provided her with the opportunity to expand and utilize this interest and this passion of hers in a productive, functional way. We all know the benefits of gardening are far-reaching, but more special is that this particular individual now again has found a way to funnel her passion into a functional way. The products and the outcome is just amazing and positive and far-reaching. There's a lot to be said about these sort of micro enterprises. There's a big push for them, at least, here in South Florida. There are several micro enterprises that are employing individuals with disabilities and, autism specifically, because individuals with autism, when you teach them something, and especially if it's something that, they're really interested in learning more about, they tend to be really, really good at following steps, right? So whether it's planting a seed and doing what needs to be done to follow up and nurture and, nourish that seed so it grows, or, whether it's putting computer pieces together and, to create the internal hardware that then, gets processed down the line, individuals with autism have really unique minds, and they all have something to contribute. And so if you can find what a particular individual, what their particular interest would be, and find a way to channel that interest so that it becomes productive and functional for them, you are creating, a job and allowing that individual to have a meaningful life. Some more examples of that down here in South Florida, we have the Rising Tides Car Wash, which is the largest employer of ASD individuals. It is located, I believe, in Coconut Creek, just 441 in Sample, I believe, right around that area. And they're about to open up another car wash, and it's fully serviced by individuals with autism. They've been featured nationally. It's incredible what they're doing. You have the chocolate spectrum, where you have individuals who are making chocolates from scratch, and they are beautiful products that they package, and send off. You have, I'm escaping, the candle sensibilities, again, making scented candles, from safe materials. I mean, lots of really wonderful things happening. And so if you're an entrepreneur and you're looking for high quality, dedicated service workers for your company, definitely look at folks on the spectrum. They're trainable and, motivated and really productive, once taught the skills.
Elisa, excuse me, I guess you are Elisa.
Elisa, that's right.
You are the assistant director of a program at FAU, and I'd like to know a little bit more about what FAU is doing in the area of autism. Now, remember, our audience is all over the world, but maybe you can be the model for what is being done. Tell our audience a little bit about FAU and its program.
Absolutely. So here at the Center for Autism and Related Disabilities, also known as CARD, we are one of 7 centers in Florida. We cover the entire state of Florida between the 7 centers. We are grant funded by the Department of Education here in Florida. And basically what that means is that allows us with the opportunity to work with individuals on the spectrum, their family members, professionals that serve them for free, no charge. We charge nothing for our services. And those services include consulting, so if we have parents who are, concerned about some things, maybe academic or home issues that are going on, or, just want more information about autism, we'll absolutely consult. We also do trainings. So we can train parents on building particular skills. For example, how to initiate, more social interaction with your child, via play, or, how to handle or manage problematic behaviors. We provide those kinds of trainings as well. We have a calendar of events online. If anybody wants to visit our website, if you Google FAU CARD, you'll be able to access that information. We have several trainings a month. And then we also refer. So if families are looking for more direct therapeutic services for their children, we have a directory of service providers that we refer families to access. Professionals in the field that have experience in working with individuals with autism. And I mentioned before that we also support professionals, so that consultation and training pieces, we also provide those to the professionals in the community as well. And again, we do all of this at no charge. We also have some really wonderful initiatives that we're rolling out this summer, one of them being the Autism Friendly Business. And what we are hoping to do is train some of the businesses in and around our community to become just more autism sensitive. So if they were to have, individuals with autism enter, their business, whether it's a store or a hotel, we can train the staff so that they are aware of what autism is, what the characteristics are, and sort of how to respond to some of the, behaviors and things that they might encounter. Again, just increasing sensitivity there. And so businesses who are, interested in that piece can contact us and we can reach out to them and set up that training. The other initiative that we're rolling out as well is a mentor program. And our mentor program is seeking to match adults with young adults, teens and young adults with autism on a one-to-one sort of format. And the match comes in with the adult at 21 years of age or older who may have a connection in a particular field or is experienced or knowledgeable in a particular field that perhaps adolescent or the young adult with autism has an interest in learning more about or has a special skill that they'd like to nurture more. And so that mentor, taking their knowledge, their wisdom, their connections, their networking capacities, and mentor their protege with autism on how to, become more skilled and more knowledgeable in that field of interest to then hopefully promote confidence and skills for future employment.
You know an awful lot about this subject, and I'm just wondering, do other states, other programs exist that are as good as yours? And if you know any around the country, I'd like you to mention other places where our audience live where they may be able to also access all this information.
Sure, I wish I had, more information. Unfortunately, I don't. The only other, grant-funded, state-funded, non-for-profit that I am familiar with, that provides the level of support that we do is the Center for Autism and Related Disabilities in New York. It was founded by the same person who founded our center here, and his name is Dr. Mark Durand. And I believe that he has, moved on and created the same sort of center, nonprofit center in New York. I've heard I haven't spoken with him directly about it, but I've spoken with staff who also do, they're also clinical specialists in New York, and from their description of their roles, it sounds like they're doing the same thing that we're doing here. As far as the remaining states, unfortunately, I don't know of any other states that have similar agencies. I know Autism Speaks has a really nice, pretty comprehensive directory of providers at their website. And so, again, if you go to Autism Speaks, I believe it's .org, they have a map of the United States. You can select the state that you're interested in, and then once you get into the state, they have all kinds of resources available for families and professionals that are autism specific, that are private as well as nonprofit. And they've categorized all of those resources as well. So that's where I would, direct folks who are interested in learning what services are available in their state, because Autism Speaks has done a really great job of pulling that information together and making it accessible.
I'm going to shift gears for just a second. For many years, I've been hearing about other ways in which an autistic child can be inspired, if you will, and that's through riding a horse and doing various other things with animals. Is there something that you can tell our audience about the possibilities that they have when they want their children to be able to get joy out of life?
Yeah, so, equine therapy or hippotherapy, the horse therapy that you're referring to, it's not an evidence-based practice. They haven't done enough research. There haven't been enough studies published showing positive outcomes of that particular, therapy. There's also dolphin therapy and, some other animal-based therapies that, as far as we're concerned as professionals, if parents see a benefit and there isn't, real risk of harm, then why not? If you have an individual who loves horse therapy, there's a lot of therapeutic components to that. Even if it's not, the research has not yet been collected in depth enough to support it as a scientific practice, but you can work on speech therapy while, working with the horse. If the child is engaged and connected to the horse, you can start building language, in a very naturalistic way. If the child has, physical impairments or challenges or gross motor issues, by brushing the horse, you're working on grip and grasping and those kinds of things. So you can use that, those interests to build on, areas that are of deficit, whether it's language or fine motor skills or gross motor skills or things like that. And that's where we see the benefit with, using animals in therapeutic settings. If you're supplementing, let's say, your speech therapy, right? If you're conducting speech therapy while engaging with an animal and you're getting language, then that's wonderful. You're using something to motivate the child to communicate. And that's really what it's all about, reaching the child based on what their motivators are, and then providing those, therapeutic interventions that we know do work, whether it's behavior therapy or speech therapy or occupational therapy. Combining that with the animals, we've seen and we've heard from families that, the children had preferred this. They prefer practicing or being with their SLP, their speech language pathologist, when they were brushing the horse, rather than in a tiny little room at a little tiny table and, it being very sterile and clinical. So those are, some thoughts on that. Mm-hmm.
Well, now I always like to let my guests have the last word.
Mm-hmm.
What would you tell our audience that you think will make all the difference in the world?
I think, and this is across environments, at home, in schools, in the community, it's really important to connect, right, to just establish a relationship with an individual with autism, regardless of, their level of communication, and just engaging them, right? And I think that I feel like kind of goes without saying with anybody, right? In order to make a connection, you want to build a relationship, or you want to build trust. And then, moving forward, just really capitalizing on their strengths. As I mentioned before, individuals on the spectrum, they all typically have one really amazing thing that they're just really good at. Whether it's computers or math, or art, capitalizing on that and taking that strength and using that strength and that special interest to build on the skills that they need to work on. So if they're working on social skills, right? So maybe they're, more mildly impacted, on that milder end of the spectrum, where the social skills is really the challenge for them. Use what they're really good at to practice, solid social skills. And there are some really good social skills curriculums out there that are evidence-based. And again, just encouragement. There is hope. There are a lot of really wonderful, successful stories here at FAU. We have many students with autism that are on campus here. Lynn University as well has a really solid program, and they are also very supportive of individuals on the spectrum. And so there's a lot of opportunities, whether a child continues in post-secondary education or goes into a vocational setting, really preparing them for either track is very important. And again, it's using their skills and their strengths to prepare them is what's going to be really the most valuable thing that individual can receive.
Well, my guest today has been Elisa Cruz-Torres, and she is a glut of information. So, Elisa, if anybody wants to ask you any questions or have any ideas that they can share with you, how do they reach you?
Sure. So, again, you can Google FAU card. Our website is actually autism.fau.edu. We can also be reached by email at card@fau.edu or by phone. Our main line is 561-297-2023, and we'll be happy to, answer any questions that anybody might have regarding supports for individuals with autism themselves. As adults, if they're looking for some referrals, we have an adult social group here that meets, and we'd be happy to share that information. Professionals, if you're looking for more development of your skills and knowledge in working with autism, the autism population, we can support you as well. And again, all of our services are at no charge. So,
well, that's very, very exciting. And I want to again thank you, Elisa, for being on the Susan Brender Show.
It was my pleasure. I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you, Susan, and engage with your audience.
Thank you.
Thank you.